you guys all so much for taking the time. I know, like, even now it's so hard to get people on at the same time and in the same virtual space. So I'm super psyched about this. So this is kind of a culmination of a lot of things. The big thing of which is getting the human stories, I guess, behind the mass redundancies. We've seen loads of articles from The Guardian to The Stage to The Independent, everything talking about the numbers of people, the sheer masses of the workforce that have just been kind of wiped off the table, without really getting kind of down into the more qualitative aspects of it, aka the people who have actually been affected, whose lives have been effectively turned upside down from this madness. So that being said, that's where you guys come in. So we're going to be talking more so about your personal experiences negotiating this time and where you've ended up now, as well as hopefully looking towards the future for how we can rebuild this industry that has been seemingly reduced to rubble. So first of all, I guess I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves, give a name and what the kind of experience has been for you, where you were at before, obviously not naming names, and what you're doing now. Lou, over to you.
Hello, so I'm Lou, as Lindsay just said. I was working front of house in one venue pre-COVID-19 pandemic, and as of Monday just gone, I've just started a different venue and went, oh, is that okay?
Up here, folks. Love it. Jay and Sam.
So yeah, I'm Jay. I was working at a venue for about 6-7 years, as well as performing and doing other creative things. Yeah, so at first it was a part-time job. I was there as a casual, and which then later on down the line I became more full-time and contract. So I had more of the contract experience through COVID. And yeah, and that's me.
I'm Sam. Hi again. I was working at a large venue just before the pandemic hit. I was working casual. I was there for about 4 years and was furloughed for a long time, and then eventually was made redundant and moved out of London, living with Jay's nan, and now just running AYT. So that's my experience working front of house in a nutshell.
Cool. And then transitioning into the more qualitative, how do you think, from your perspective and your perspective alone, how do you think this was handled in your specific case? You can talk about the communication that you received from the institution that you were working with, communication among the other employees. How do you feel like you were treated as a result of this experience?
Yeah. In my experience, I think starting for the positives, I think we were furloughed quite quickly, and so the security we felt was immediate, and it was there, which I know was missing for a lot of other front of house workers. So that was great. And like I said, we were furloughed for quite a while. Then the negatives, communication, and this is something that has long been a problem with this venue. The communication was crap, and we never really knew what was going on. It's a big place. It takes a while for things to trickle from the top down to us. I think mostly because they don't really seem to know what's going on, and we probably, apart from obviously like it's been great with furloughed, I just don't think we really matter as much perhaps as we should. So on negative side, communication was bad. We were in the dark a lot of the time, even though we were furloughed. We didn't know when that might end, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it was good when I was initially furloughed. All of that happened quite quickly. I think the hardest part for me was just going from working somewhere to then not hearing anything from anyone. Like I still to this day have not heard from my manager, like an actual personal email. And I worked there for, like I said, nearly 7 years. So it's very strange to have not heard back from anybody to say, I'm so sorry that you've lost your job, but thank you so much for, you know. And I mean, I was actually one of the lucky ones to more recently be offered a job again at the venue that I was working at. So I didn't completely lose my job overall. But obviously it was somebody higher up. It wasn't actually my immediate manager that I heard from. So it's very strange to, and obviously my circumstances have changed since then as well. So I no longer am working there. So I have technically left, you know? So I just find that weird, because to work somewhere for so long, and any job that you work at, you would have a closure. And I still don't really feel like I've had that, which is a bit disheartening. But it's very hard to judge as well, because you just don't know what's happening for them either at this time. It's very, it's not a normal time for everyone. So I don't judge them, but I do feel disheartened by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, if I may, I think I agree with both, because my introduction wasn't very good, I realised, because I worked in a venue that was very big, and I hadn't been there very long. I wasn't even working in the building. I think I was there 9 months, whereas it was a building where lots of people had been there so long, had been there for years and years. And so I feel like I didn't really feel a huge loss. I sort of saw it coming, really.
Yeah.
And I think that the decision, I was on a casual agreement, it's not even a contract. So you've signed something to say you don't have a contract, and you don't have any rights, really. Which that's, you know, and when you sign that, you're in a position, usually you're coming from a place of no employment. So of course you're going to sign it, because you think it's a bit more security than it's going to be. And I don't think that's going to change reopening venues, not necessarily after, but kind of moving through this period where a lot of things are reopening. I think that the casual agreement is favourable now almost more than ever, because if we go into another lockdown, if the tier system changes, all these different things, the moment that happens, they can say, well, you know, we can't do anything about that. You haven't signed anything. And I think, unfortunately, even though we'd all like to see that it's going to go in a complete other direction, and we would all, moving forward, maybe have a bit more security, I think that casual contracts, especially in entertainment venues, moving forward for, I think, probably the next year, 18 months, are going to be more prevalent than ever. Which is a shame, isn't it? But at the same time, I did sign it, and I made that agreement work to my advantage. I had no contractual obligations to give a certain amount of availability. If I wanted to go home for a week, you know, before all of this, obviously, if I wanted to go home, if I had a creative job come up, I could just do it. I didn't have to give rhyme or reason as to why I couldn't be in the venue. But as invaluable as that is for a creative, that the pros outweigh the cons. I don't know, but I'm in complete agreement about the lack of communication, and I think a decision was made quite early on to let casuals go from the venue I was working at, but that wasn't, I just wish the communication had been clearer, that was probably going to happen a lot sooner than when it was confirmed. And I think the way it was done as well is that, like, we all received a mass email. Mine didn't even have my name on it. It wasn't even, you know, dear Louise or anything. from a person that I personally had never even met in the venue. And I also agree with there was just so little outreach. I think that an email from any member of not necessarily senior management team, but the front of house management or anything like that would have just made everything a bit more personal. It felt very formal and detached, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, you have to appreciate that a lot of these venues had no idea what was going on because the government had no idea what was going on, and they're competent. So I think you can appreciate that, but I think, like, with some venues, another one I was working at, this whole not really knowing what they're doing thing didn't start when the pandemic started. I know it started when I started working at where I was, and so, you know, it kind of just really highlighted it, and I think that's why a lot of people were just more frustrated, and this disconnect and the lack of respect as well just kind of continued, didn't it? And yeah,
I think in front of house generally, I think it's not as easy a job as people like to think it is. I mean, I've worked at 4 different front of house venues in the West End, and throughout my time, being a creative, they are the jobs that we need, you know, so we rely on getting those jobs to pay the rent, you know, to still be creative, because our creative jobs don't always bring in that money, you know, and we're constantly having to fight between the creative jobs and the day-to-day jobs, you know. It's not an easy life to live, but I feel like a lot of us try to do it as well as we possibly can, and I don't think there's enough credit really given to performers and creatives who are taking on these roles from the people who run these establishments. Don't get me wrong, I've worked at some venues where they have definitely understood a creative, because maybe they've been a creative themselves, you know, and I always find they're the best managers to have in that sort of establishment. But unfortunately, I do think more and more that these theatres are actually not run like that. And I don't think the understanding is always coming across between the management and the creatives doing these roles. There's not many people out there who would do a front of house job because that's their life goal, that's their life job to do. You know, it's people like us who will do those jobs with the passion, because we love theatre and we understand why they work for us. I do think there needs to be more of an understanding coming from the other side for performers working those roles.
I do think, just quickly jump in, I think it's important to highlight that some people do work front of house because they enjoy it and they do like to pursue it as their career and not just, you know, to juggle creative jobs. I just wanted to jump in and quickly.
And there's nothing wrong with
anyone.
And there's nothing wrong with that either.
And
there's nothing wrong with that either, you know. I do think that it's just hard to compare people who are not doing that full time and to kind of brush them away because it's not their love, it's not their one job they've always wanted to do, yet they will still go there and do the best that they can. You know, just because we have another creative outlet doesn't mean we're not going to give our all to this job. But I think sometimes it's kind of seen that you won't, just because it's not your life job. Does that make sense?
It really does. I feel that people skills in so many jobs are so terminally underrated as just things that people value. And in fact, the skills that I know all of you guys bring, but I'm sure to the wider industry as well, the skills that a creative can bring to any role is that adaptability and that flexibility, and also while making people feel like comfortable and at home as well. It actually is multifaceted in so many ways, and yet we exist at this kind of bottom of the triangle where it's kind of the bulk of the workforce. And by that nature, you kind of think like, oh, well, I guess we can kind of dispose of and add in as we see fit, because it's kind of this big machine that you're helping to run. So I think that you guys are, very well said on all your parts. And I think to some extent, there's a degree of like playing the creative lottery as well. When you undertake a job, like you were saying, Lou, like with a casual contract, you're doing it on the kind of understanding or on the hope that, you know, Spielberg might be calling tomorrow and like, you know, you could say, see you later kind of guys. Yeah. Spielberg, where you at, bro? But we kind of have these like these hopes, and so you give up some of the what you might expect as being sort of worker rights or worker freedoms for the hope and the idea that you can continue sort of working in the field that you love and that you want to be working in. So I guess I would love to transition here into like what your creative pursuits are and how you've made that work around the front of house kind of spheres, and how that looks going into the future. Pick any one of those, because that's a lot.
Yeah. So before I worked at the venue I was at, just as the pandemic hit, I was working at another where I was contracted, and for a while that worked for me. But then as my creative job changed and grew, I just couldn't be in a job that was contracted. I just didn't have the time to do that. So I then moved to the venue I was most recently at, and that was casual, and that worked a lot better for me because I run AYT now. I also work as a freelance writer, and I just need that headspace, and I just need that, to know that I can have a bit of time off if I want. I don't have to work like 6 shows a week. I just needed that, so I made it work for me. But I mean, at the same time, the venue that I was just at even though it was casual and it was supposed to be flexible, there was still a little bit of pressure to work a certain amount of shows per week. So even though it was more flexible than the previous venue I was at, this one wasn't quite as flexible as they're made out to be. I don't know what other people watching, what their experiences are with this as well, whether they have had true freedom with working in casual contracts and they've really made it work for them. But I mean, yeah, it was better than being on contract, but at this particular venue, it was still, it still wasn't all it was made out to be. I don't think it wasn't quite as positive. I don't know what your guys' experiences.
I'll jump in. I came, before I worked in the venue I was working in pre-pandemic, I was working in restaurants in quite busy areas, one in London Bridge, one in Victoria, and one in Oxford Circus. So sleuths out there can figure out where I was, which company I worked for. But they were really high volume areas of the city. And so I was working minimum 40 hours a week all the time. And I was working as a host, which I think almost drove me to insanity. And I ended up working at this venue kind of by accident. I was moving to another restaurant job and it fell through. And I was suddenly in this place where I was like, oh, what have I done? And so then having a casual contract gave me more security than that 6 weeks where I had no job. And that was way more terrifying. So of course I was happy to just take anything, really. And then I think I found the casual contract thing to be more of a blessing than a curse, really. And yeah, so originally it started out looking like it was kind of on my terms when I wanted to be in the building and work around my schedule. And then it turned out that they preferred to have a minimum amount of available, like a certain amount of availability a week. But that never really bothered me because I'd come from this environment where if you only did 40 hours a week, well done. Like you've dodged a bullet, because at Christmas previously you'd be working like 60 hours a week, 6 days, maybe 7 days, because it was so busy. And so, having say, I don't know, just a handful of days to do, or only a certain, a minimum amount of hours a week, even though it was casual, was still far superior to what I was coming from. Yeah, that was my point. Sorry, that was articulate, wasn't it? It's still early, right?
It's still early. I'm still
Waking up.
drinking my coffee.
Yeah, as am I.
Always early nowadays.
For me, I've had some really good experiences working front of house through the years. It's really helped me to be able to do what I've wanted to do, you know. And I've met so many amazing people who are still all in my life from every single front of house place that I've worked. We've become such a huge family. Yeah, so for me, like, I wouldn't change it at all. You know, I think front of house is a great job. And I think, like I said before, I think it's underrated. And you can create such a community with each other, and you support each other, you know. You know, if you have an audition, for us actors out there that pick up the front of house jobs, you know, if you have an audition and somebody else you're working with can cover your shift and you can swap, you know, there's very rarely you find a job that can let you do that. But unfortunately, what I was saying earlier is that I think that flexibility is kind of disappearing within these jobs, and I think that's what would be a shame, because I do think it creates the company. You know, there's a company on stage performing those shows, and there's a company backstage or in the front of house areas, you know, that are a company too, working together to make it work. And I think that if we don't support artists with the flexibility, then we're going to lose that.
You're so onto it though, Dave, because it's like we're the first people that anyone sees when they go in to have this experience, oftentimes that has had like thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds poured into it in some cases. And we have, in that respect, a whole lot of sway in terms of how we color somebody's night, you know, like how if you meet someone who's kind of shitty to you at the very beginning, that, I mean, one-off comment can like color a whole night, and you spent, you know, hundreds of pounds on a ticket and too much money on a red wine or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I think FOH workers are great. Yeah. I had a question kind of, it's along the same lines, but this is more kind of theoretical for you guys. I'm wondering what you think the kind of obligation of a company is towards its staff. And this is maybe a broader question that can be applied to a lot of different things. But what these places are businesses, right? And I think we all have a baseline understanding of the fact that there needs to be some kind of money going in and money spent to kind of keep the wheels turning and all that. But at a certain point, like you were saying, Jay, to what extent are the relationships and families kind of formed within that building? At what point are they integral to the experience? And at what point can you sort of chop them off and pare them away? And I think we're seeing that in really interesting ways now with different theaters and different companies across the West End, but also the whole country. So do you think in your own minds that a business or a theater or a charity in some cases has an obligation to the people for whom it's provided livelihoods?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to go first again because I love
Do
it,
it.
obviously.
Jump in.
But I think just from my personal experience working in front of house or bar, I was on the bar. I just think that they need to treat people like us like we are not special, but that we are, you know, valued members of the company. You know, like just like there's people on stage, we are part of the company. So we should not be treated as disposable. And they do also owe us a duty of care, which kind of goes off onto a whole other subject in perhaps how other parts of the company treat front of house and how that is handled. So I think, yeah, the venues, the charities, whatever, they owe us a duty of care, and they owe us respect as well, and just to kind of remember how much of an integral part of that place we are. Yeah, that's what I think.
Following that, I'm going to be a bit on the other side now. Basically, I also think, though, that we do have to think about things from the other side, from not just ourselves. And I can understand that it is also hard for management or for these companies to run a theatre in the way that they have to do it, you know, and, you know, so it is difficult to please everybody. So I don't want us to come across like we're like, oh, we deserve all this respect, you know, because there are some people
A
out
little
there
bit
that
of respect. You
there
know,
are
like
people
human
out
beings
there
should get.
there are people out there that will do a front of house job thinking, oh, that's a piss easy job, I'm just going to do that, and will take the mick, you know. And I do think that there is a line. I don't know what I'm saying here. I don't know where I've gone with this.
Well, I think you're speaking from your experience as someone that supervises a team, and I also was a supervisor, so I understand. And you know, people do take the piss, and they do these jobs, and perhaps then don't return the respect that we expect.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't want us to just be like, oh, woe is me, you know, because I do think the respect has to go both ways. And I do understand that it's not always black and white to run a company like a theatre. You know, and it's front of house, especially in some of the big theatres, you know, running front of house, there's so many different people in charge. You know, and so then when we go to somewhere like go into a situation like lockdown, I don't necessarily know that it is about disrespecting us, you know, because I know that one of our managers is actually a friend of mine as well, and she was completely in the dark as much as I was, you know. So can you be like, oh, they disrespected me, if they also was in the dark? I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't speaking in this instance in like to do with the pandemic. It was just kind of generally, and I think you said earlier, was it you, Lou, who said that, or maybe Jay, who said that it's better if the people who are like managers are people that can empathise, who have done front of house jobs themselves. So I think if that is the case, then they will have that respect that we deserve, and I think that respect will then be returned, because they will like treat you on the same level and treat you on the level that you should be treated, I suppose. And it all comes back down to empathy. I think there's just a lot of empathy lacking, and that's all I ask for, I think. But I mean, I agree with Jay as well. I mean, supervising people can be very difficult when they take the mick. But I think being treated as disposable is just a big problem generally in large venues. And when you can just get someone else just like that, you know, you can throw someone out the door, get another one in instantly. Like, got to remember that people are human.
I think that's a big problem in general of working class people, not just front of house, but any job that involves working in like a customer service based establishment. You know, I think I've worked so many jobs in my life, you know, to be able to do the creative job that I've always wanted to do, you know. And I think we struggle because we are always watching people who don't have to do these jobs get to places quicker, because they haven't got to waste time doing all these jobs and struggling to fight and struggling, you know. I'm an actor, and even just paying my spotlight each year, I'm like, can I afford it this year? You know, okay, I'll just not eat that week, that month, you know. And you're just like, you know, there's so much money we have to pay out, and I think people forget how difficult it is to be creative and be a working class person.
And I think just hearing you guys speak, one of the things that kind of occurs to me now, especially post like Fatima's next job could be in cyber, and I know that's a whole other kettle of fish, but yeah, right. Need we get started. But I just think there's an inherent undervaluing of the arts in general, right? And there might be, at least on the parts of these institutions, some kind of a desire to like maintain or just reassert legitimacy as businesses and as, you know, institutions that get shit done in a lot of ways. Because I mean, if that's how the rest of society is looking at these industries, you know, it could be an effort to sort of add at least some kind of backbone to a thing that, you know, might feel inherently undervalued, just in general, on so many different facets.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to figures as well, doesn't it? Like you can be a business that is like for the arts, but then at the end of the day you have to, hi Lou, but then you also have to,
I'm still here.
but then you also have to take money, and for company venues that rely mostly on grants, you know, they have to put in their applications that they're bringing in a certain amount of money. So then, like you said, Lindsay, they have to legitimize themselves, and they have to like kind of prove that they're doing that. Like they have the art, they are producing the arts or whatever, they are doing that, but they also have to make sure that they're, you know, bringing in the money. And I guess that can also be why, just kind of going off on one a little bit, why we sometimes feel that maybe some theatres are not producing the work that we want them to. Like they are trying to what's the word? They are just trying to be agreeable with the people that buy the most tickets, that make up the majority of their patrons, and yeah, and perhaps aren't as diverse as we want them to be. And yeah, again, I digress, but you know, it just goes back to that you said, Lindsay, like just trying to be legitimate and just trying to just make art important, I suppose.
I was just thinking that those front of house positions are so important to making that extra bit of income for theatres, because especially now, if theatres are trying to, or if theatres are reopening, they probably wouldn't be able to reopen financially with 50% capacity alone. So looking at all those extra outlets for income, they're all positions that we all worked on, whether it's bar, whether it's selling snacks, whether it's merch from the show, all those things. I don't think I fully realized how integral that part of front of house is, apart from providing a experience or however people it. Yeah,
I think that
really got a point. Could you tell?
It does raise a good
thinking
point,
about it.
though. It raises a good point of like recently, well, not just recently, it's been quite a while now. A few theatres run some of their outlets independently. And I think that's something that's happening more and more and more. So rather than there being front of house teams working in the cafes or in the bars, you know, they're actually, those outlets are being taken over by companies, you know. And I think that is going to lead to a massive problem down the line. I think good for theatres because they need to make the money. You know, they're obviously going to make more money by renting out to these independent companies rather than doing everything in-house. But unfortunately, it will damage the working class creatives that rely on those jobs because we can't do it anywhere else, you know. So I think going also back to what Sam was saying, it kind of takes everything into a circle with then like, you're not only going to be putting on productions to please maybe the upper classes, but you're also going to end up having nobody in those productions who are part of the working class either, because we won't be able to afford to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. I think that's such an important consideration, especially for this time, because I mean, even now, I've known of many people, yourselves included, close friends, leaving London because the work and the sort of the great secondaries of being a Londoner are no longer possible. Like you can't even go see a show in your spare time, kind of thing. Yeah. And forcing people to, you know, get different types of jobs, different types of sectors, because a lot of the hospitality, front of house kind of stuff has just been taken off the board. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people, friends of mine who aren't necessarily involved in creative industries, they don't fully understand, because they've basically gone from a transition of working in the office to working in their home office. And that's been, and obviously it's tough socially, and the isolation that one feels, not taking that away on any stretch. But when I've spoken about how most of the work that I do involves people in rooms, and it's just impossible. It's just off the table now. Even friends I know that work in pubs, they're down to their bare bones skeleton kind of staffs. because they just don't, they can't afford to pay that many people to do those things anymore. I think it's really affected disproportionately people who are working class or make under the sort of 35K average or whatever it is for this country right now. And I think that's something that we as an industry have to be so aware of, in moving forward, because then the art that we create is just going to be by people, for people of a very certain class.
Yeah.
Mm.
We lived in London for what, 11, 12 years?
Yeah, I always think I was there for about 14 years.
Yeah. So, and I was there about 12. And, you know, we've had to leave London because, one, we didn't know, this was going back to the beginning of this conversation, we had no idea how long we were going to be furloughed for, you know. So you go, okay, so we've got to make plans for the worst scenario. Our worst scenario is that we won't be able to pay our rent. You know, that wasn't stopping. You know, the rents didn't go on furlough. You know, like, we had to pay rent no matter what, and bills, you know, but you don't know that money's going to keep coming in or not. And I think that was one of the hard parts of this time, was not knowing how long you were going to be paid for. So going back to the communication side of things and respect, I think it's kind of presuming that people, oh, if you can't afford it, it doesn't matter. But actually, we rely heavily. Creatives don't have banks of savings. Most of us who are working class, we live day to day. We live month to month. Can I pay my rent this month with the earnings I'm going to earn this month? That's how I get by. You know, I don't have those savings in the account to get me through for a year of no work. You know, and I think that has to be taken into consideration a lot more, not just by these establishments, but by our government. You know, that people who are working class doing creative roles need more support than they're getting. Massive amounts of more support.
Yeah, but then the arts need to be taken more seriously, don't they? And I just don't know. I just don't think they're seeing as taking in the money that they do for this country in particular. I just don't think it's seen, which is just bizarre to me. But I just don't think it is, and that's why they want us to retrain. You know, as cyber hacker freaks. I don't know.
just putting it out there as well, that if you like cyber, you're not a freak.
But also, like, I just want to say as well, like, I know I am so grateful to have been furloughed, and also I'm in a very, very privileged position in that I had somewhere to move to. Like, we didn't think we could afford to pay our rent anymore in London, but we were very privileged in that we had somewhere to move to Jay's Nan's. We had that, and I appreciate that a lot of people out there, like, just have been in such awful toxic situations, and I don't know how they've got through it. I really don't. From losing their jobs working in front of house, it's just
Guys, I'm just conscious of time. We're coming up on the hour here. I'd like to ask you all for any things that you'd like to say in summary to round up. Any hopes for the future? If you could design a theater, what would it look like? Anything that kind of sparks your creative juices, mixing metaphors, all that good stuff. Yeah, anything that you'd like to say to kind of round off the conversation and send us on our merry ways. Lou, do you want to start off?
I can. What shall I say? No pressure. I was just thinking, just off the back of what you guys have just said, the arts are always really they're underappreciated. I'm not sure is the word, but we live a turbulent life as it is. So when all this sort of happened, it didn't feel like a big surprise to me, because creatives are, as we said earlier, we're the most flexible, the most versatile people in the world. Even with this whole, I don't really want to get into the retrain for cyber thing, because I don't think it needs any of our energy or concentration or in any way. But we could all retrain in cyber as a day job and we'd all smash it, because we're so, we've got, I don't know what to say, we've got thick skin, we've got, I don't want to say balls of steel, but you know, we will thrive and we'll come through it.
Yeah.
Despite, you know, and
I think we're also very open as well. You know, I think we grow up being told, get a real job. You know, what you want to do isn't a real job. So that makes us actually really driven. It makes us determined, not just to be successful as creatives, but to be successful and good at any job that we do. Whether that be a bar job, whether that be cleaning the floors or the toilets, you know, any job we will do with 100%. You know, like we just do. I've seen everybody do that, because that's just, we are people pleasers, I think, because we've been told so much that we're worthless, you know, so, but it's true, right? So, and then that we've all become so open-minded and aware of so many different people around us with different needs, that I think it does make us like perfect candidates for most jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of can-do attitude, it's not necessarily like we've got something to prove, but it's almost like, I don't know, a sort of untouchability when it's inside, in that, okay, I can go in and do this bar job. And that's fine, because that is, you know, this is a means to an end. This isn't my whole world. Even if you're working in a creative venue, if you're not in the department that you necessarily like want to be working in, I think there's a real kind of almost classiness to being able to go in and, you know, deal with customers who are hangry because they haven't eaten anything between leaving the office and coming to the theatre, and they don't know where the toilets are, and they've spilt water all over the floor. If you can leave that at the door at the end of the shift and walk away, you can walk away with your head held high, because you're so much more than that position. And I think we all need to sort of remember that, is that like, yeah, okay, so I know so many people have lost front of house jobs, and not just front of house. So every industry has been really, really impacted by this. If we can deal with patrons vomiting on us or swearing at us because you haven't got enough cab sab or anything like that, we'll be fine. We're all gonna be fine. And that in a few months, years, whatever, we'll look back on this and we'll all be, I think it's a good incentive, is what I'm trying to say, in a way, to go forward. That's how I feel about it anyway. Some people might feel completely differently, but when I was let go, I was sad on a personal level, not professional level, because we're all so brilliantly versatile, and we will all find other work. We will. It'll just take it's going to be a bit of a slug, but it's a slug for everybody.
Yeah.
And the arts have been underappreciated and definitely overlooked. But I, for one, wasn't surprised by that at all. And so I just want to say we're all going to be fine.
I think that's that resilience you talk about is just, it's so obvious, but it's so true. Like, I think.
Yeah. And I think everyone forgets it.
Yeah, and we have to put up with so much crap. And you do end up learning these random skills doing these jobs as well that you never thought you would. And you come out of it and you're like, oh my God, I can do this. I can open a bottle of champagne. I'm so talented. Yeah. And not let it go everywhere. No, I'm joking. That's not that big a skill. But
I couldn't do it before my first front of house job.
You're a new woman. But yeah, I think, and I really hope that us creatives as a whole will be okay. But I think we've learned to adapt to not this specific situation, but really crap situations, and we've learned to have a thick skin and Yeah.
I do think this situation has reminded us all, though, of our worth, and
Yeah.
that we were doing these jobs because we're creatives. And you take away the front of house jobs, and you take away being able to get another job right now, and you go, okay, so what are my strengths? What am I doing? What is my purpose to begin with? You know, because we fight so much, and we make excuses sometimes too, but we fight so much against, what am I saying? We fight so much to make money, to earn money, that it actually takes over. And we forget that actually sometimes it's not all about money, and sometimes we can create things on the cheap, you know, and do it well. And we can create businesses from scratch, and we can climb our own ladder, you know. And I think that's something we all need to take from this. Remember, what is your creative outlet in yourself, and what can you put out there without relying on anybody else, and do it now.
What are you doing watching this video? Do it now. Jenny, you guys also eloquent, also beautiful, and like worth is just such a lovely note to end on, because I think sometimes these jobs can fool us into making us feel like we are less than worthy. Was doing some prep for this, and looks like over 5,000 people in the theater industry, so that includes like the rear of house kind of crews and stuff like that, have lost their jobs at the time of writing. So that was in September, permanently, because of COVID. And that's just a massive chunk of the workforce. And again, like the West End alone brings in £20 billion a year. And that's obviously, a lot of it is from, half of it's from tourists, and a lot of it is from the restaurants and the sort of secondary businesses that flourish around these kind of sort of main points, these flashpoints that are the theaters. So even in terms of the the actual financial nitty gritty, we do have worth. And I really hope that this time for all of us, but also everyone who's watching, has, even if it's just for a second, afforded a pause to maybe go after some of those creative endeavors, or at least just finding that creative worth that you talked about, Jay, because it's so important. And my goodness, the world needs us.
Definitely. I'm just gonna close us off as well,
Do
if
it,
that's okay with you, Lindsay. That was beautiful. Thank you. So thank you everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed and found solace in the stories we have told today. If you'd like to chat further with us, then please get in touch via social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook on @ayungertheatre or ayungertheatre, and @ayungertheatre_ on Instagram. If you would like any advice or help, then we strongly urge you to get in touch with the Theatrical Guild on ttg.org.uk, or join Beck2 and speak to your rep there. Details will be left in the description of this video. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. Finally, and we know that many of you, like us, are going through extreme financial hardships, but if you can spare the odd quid, then we would really appreciate you visiting our Patreon and consider becoming a monthly friend of AYT. Tiers start at just £1, and every penny goes towards paying the amazing, hardworking people that make AYT what it is. Thank you again for watching, and please take care of yourselves. Have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.